The night was unnervingly quiet in Briarwood Heights, a suburban haven nestled near Charleston, South Carolina. The date was September 14, 2023, and a brisk autumn chill lingered in the air. Inside a grand two-story home, the kitchen light spilled out onto the lawn, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. But the serenity of the scene betrayed the horror within. On the cold, tiled floor of the kitchen lay Madeline Harper, her once vibrant life extinguished. Blood pooled around her body, stark against the pale grout. Her auburn hair fanned out, now matted with crimson. A knife, its handle smeared with red, rested ominously near her outstretched hand. The room was a chaotic tableau, shattered glass, an overturned chair, and the faint metallic tang of blood in the air. At precisely 10:42 p.m., the front door creaked open. Elliot Harper, a charismatic 35-year-old realtor, stepped inside. His tailored jacket hung limply over his arm, and his polished shoes echoed faintly against the hardwood floor. He called out into the silence, "Madeline? Are you awake?" No response. He walked toward the kitchen, his pace quickening. When his eyes fell upon her lifeless form, he froze. His face contorted in horror, his breath caught in his throat. For a fleeting moment, his gaze darted toward the security camera perched in the corner of the room. Then, with trembling hands, he pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed 911. "She's dead," he stammered, his voice cracking. "My wife, she's dead." The dispatcher's calm voice urged him to stay on the line, but Elliot stumbled backward, dropping the phone onto the counter. He pressed his palms against his face, his shoulders shaking. To anyone watching, he appeared the picture of a devastated husband, but the faint glint in his eye as he glanced at the camera again suggested otherwise. Madeline Harper was adored by her students and colleagues alike. At 34, she embodied grace and resilience, balancing her career as a dedicated elementary school teacher with her role as a loving wife. But beneath her composed exterior, she sensed something was amiss. Her husband, Elliot, had always been a man of charm. His profession demanded it. As a successful realtor, he thrived on his ability to win people over. But lately, that charm felt hollow. His late nights at work became more frequent. His once spontaneous gestures of affection had dwindled. And when he was home, his attention was elsewhere, distant and detached. Madeline's suspicions grew, but she buried them under layers of rationalization. "It's the stress of work," she told herself. "He's just tired." Still, the pit in her stomach refused to ease. It was here, just a month earlier, on August 12th, that Madeline and Elliot had hosted a dinner party. The dining room buzzed with laughter and the clinking of glasses, but Madeline couldn't shake the tension simmering beneath the surface. Her sister, Chloe Harper, had arrived late, her signature black dress hugging her slim frame. At 28, Chloe was everything Madeline wasn't: spontaneous, bold, and unapologetically self-assured. The two sisters had always been close, but their differences often created an undercurrent of rivalry. Throughout the evening, Madeline noticed Chloe's gaze lingering on Elliot. Their conversations were animated, punctuated by Chloe's melodic laughter and the occasional touch of her hand on his arm. It was subtle, but to Madeline, it felt like a spark igniting a powder keg. Madeline confided her unease to her closest friend after the guests had left. "Chloe's always been flirtatious," her friend reassured her, brushing off her concerns. "You're overthinking it." But Madeline couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt. Madeline began to keep tabs on Elliot's behavior. She checked his phone when he left it unattended, examined receipts tucked into his jacket pockets, and noted the inconsistencies in his stories. What she found shattered her world. There were text messages, intimate, suggestive ones. Photos sent back and forth. Dates and times of clandestine meetings. Chloe's name appeared over and over again. Madeline's heart pounded as she scrolled through the damning evidence. But it wasn't just the affair. Buried deep in Elliot's financial records, she uncovered massive debts and hidden accounts. He'd been siphoning money from their joint savings, building a web of deceit far more elaborate than she'd imagined. That night, Madeline sat alone at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she held the divorce papers she had drafted earlier that day. She knew confronting Elliot would be a risk, but she couldn't live with the lies any longer. She had to act. She didn't know it then, but her decision to expose Elliot would set into motion a chain of events that would end in bloodshed. The Harper family was the embodiment of suburban success. Their home, a pristine two-story colonial nestled in Briarwood Heights, was both a sanctuary and a stage. It stood as a testament to years of hard work and a seemingly unshakable marriage. Yet beneath the polished facade, the foundation was crumbling, riddled with secrets and unspoken truths. At 34, Madeline Harper was the picture of grace and resilience. A beloved elementary school teacher, she had built her life around nurturing others, her students, her friends, and most of all, her husband. Her auburn hair framed a kind face, and her warm smile was often enough to calm the most restless child in her classroom. But in recent months, that smile had faded, replaced by a subtle tension that only those closest to her could notice. Madeline had always trusted her instincts, a trait that served her well both professionally and personally. Yet, when it came to her marriage, she second-guessed herself. The late nights Elliot claimed were for work, the brief but distant exchanges during dinner, the way he avoided her gaze, it all gnawed at her. She couldn't pinpoint when things had begun to shift, but the growing void between them was undeniable. The cracks in their marriage became painfully clear during a seemingly insignificant moment in late July. Elliot had come home late again, his shirt wrinkled and his tie loosened. He brushed past Madeline's attempt at a warm greeting, muttering something about a long meeting. As he poured himself a drink, Madeline noticed a faint perfume lingering on his jacket, a scent that wasn't hers. Her stomach tightened. She wanted to confront him then and there, but the fear of confirmation silenced her. Instead, she retreated to the sanctuary of their bedroom, her mind spinning with unanswered questions. Elliot Harper, 35, was the kind of man who could command a room with a single smile. As one of Charleston's top real estate agents, he thrived in high-pressure environments. His clients trusted him, his colleagues envied him, and his neighbors admired him. But the Elliot Harper who charmed boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals was a carefully crafted persona. At home, the cracks in his polished veneer were beginning to show. To those around him, Elliot seemed to have it all, a thriving career, a beautiful wife, and a home that radiated success. But inside, he was a man trapped by his own ambition and deceit. Years of overspending and risky investments had left him drowning in debt. Rather than admitting his failures, Elliot had turned to lies. He opened secret accounts, funneled money from joint savings, and even dipped into funds Madeline had set aside for their future. Elliot justified his actions with rehearsed rationalizations. He was protecting their lifestyle, preserving the image they had worked so hard to build. But deep down, he knew the truth. If Madeline ever discovered the full extent of his betrayals, his carefully constructed world would come crashing down. It was during one of his late-night escapades that he found solace in the most unexpected place, Madeline's younger sister, Chloe. At 28, Chloe Harper was everything her older sister wasn't, free-spirited, bold, and unapologetically self-assured. Where Madeline was nurturing and grounded, Chloe was a force of nature, flitting from one job to another and living life on her own terms. Her striking blonde hair and magnetic personality drew people in effortlessly, but behind her confident exterior was a woman who often felt overshadowed by her sister's achievements. Growing up, Chloe had always admired Madeline, even envied her. But as they entered adulthood, that admiration turned into quiet resentment. Chloe felt like she was constantly being compared to her older sister, the perfect wife, the perfect teacher, the perfect role model. Chloe's impulsive nature and transient lifestyle had always made her the black sheep of the family, a label she wore with a mix of pride and bitterness. When Chloe moved to Somerville, just 10 minutes from Madeline's home, it was meant to be a fresh start. But instead, it became the catalyst for something much darker. Her frequent visits to the Harper household brought her closer to Elliot, and their initial friendship quickly spiraled into something forbidden. To Chloe, Elliot was everything she craved: charming, attentive, and, most importantly, a way to step out of Madeline's shadow. She didn't intend to betray her sister, at least not at first. But as their stolen moments turned into clandestine meetings, Chloe found herself unable to resist the allure of the forbidden. The turning point came on August 12, during a dinner party at the Harper home. The dining room was alive with laughter and conversation, the table adorned with candles and fine china. Madeline had worked tirelessly to create a warm and inviting atmosphere, but beneath her poised exterior, she couldn't shake the unease she'd felt for weeks. Chloe arrived late, as usual, her figure wrapped in a sleek black dress that drew more than a few glances. She greeted Madeline with a kiss on the cheek and Elliot with a lingering smile. Throughout the evening, Madeline watched as Chloe and Elliot engaged in animated conversation, their laughter rising above the chatter of the other guests. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to make Madeline's stomach churn. Later that night, as she cleared the dishes, a close friend pulled her aside. "Is everything okay?" the friend asked, her tone cautious. "I couldn't help but notice. Chloe and Elliot seem very close." Madeline forced a smile, brushing off the comment with a laugh. But deep down, she knew her friend had seen what she herself couldn't ignore. Something was very, very wrong. The bonds that once tied the Harper family together were fraying, and the tension between them was no longer a secret. Madeline's instincts screamed at her to uncover the truth, but she had no idea how far the deception went, or how devastating the consequences would be. As the summer of 2023 unfolded, the Harper household became a crucible of unspoken conflicts and hidden desires. What began as subtle unease between Madeline and Elliot soon grew into an unbearable tension, fueled by secrets that threatened to destroy their fragile facade. Beneath the surface, Chloe and Elliot's forbidden relationship deepened, and with it, the stakes for everyone involved. Elliot and Chloe's affair didn't start with a grand declaration or a stolen kiss, it began with stolen moments. At first, it was nothing more than casual conversation during Chloe's frequent visits to the Harper home. She'd arrive unannounced, flashing her usual bright smile, claiming she just happened to be in the neighborhood. Madeline, ever trusting of her younger sister, welcomed her without hesitation. Elliot initially kept his distance, but Chloe had a way of drawing him in. She would linger in the kitchen while Madeline was busy, leaning against the counter as she laughed at his jokes. Her touch was fleeting but deliberate, a hand on his shoulder, a brush of her fingers against his arm. It was intoxicating, and Elliot found himself looking forward to her visits more than he cared to admit. By mid-June, their casual interactions had turned into secret rendezvous. It started with late-night texts, innocuous at first, then increasingly intimate. Chloe's messages were playful and suggestive, and Elliot couldn't resist responding in kind. Before long, they were meeting at a small restaurant in Folly Beach, far enough from Charleston to avoid familiar eyes. Under the dim lights of the secluded corner booth, Chloe confided in Elliot. She spoke of her frustrations with being compared to Madeline, her resentment of always being seen as the less accomplished sister. Elliot listened intently, offering words of validation that felt more like confessions. He shared his own grievances about his marriage, how Madeline had grown distant, how he felt trapped under the weight of expectations. Their shared bitterness became the glue that bound them, and their affair deepened into something neither could control. As Elliot and Chloe's relationship intensified, Madeline's suspicions grew. She wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but the signs were impossible to ignore. Elliot's late nights at work became more frequent, and his explanations more vague. He'd leave the house early on weekends, claiming to have showings with clients, yet his suits often came back with the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers. One evening in late July, as Elliot stepped into the shower, Madeline noticed his phone buzzing on the nightstand. A message preview flashed on the screen: "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, Red Heart, Chloe." Madeline's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled as she opened the message thread, scrolling through weeks of texts that confirmed her worst fears. The playful banter, the suggestive emojis, the plans for secret dinners, it was all there, undeniable and damning. Her initial reaction was shock, followed by a wave of nausea. She couldn't believe Chloe, her own sister, would betray her like this. But as the shock faded, it was replaced by a steely resolve. Madeline knew she couldn't confront them without proof, so she began documenting everything, taking screenshots of the messages, noting the dates and times of Elliot's supposed work commitments, and quietly observing their behavior during Chloe's visits. Madeline's investigation didn't stop at the affair. Her meticulous nature led her to dig deeper into Elliot's financial records, and what she found was even more shocking. Bank statements revealed hidden accounts, massive credit card debts, and unexplained withdrawals from their joint savings. Receipts for expensive dinners, jewelry, and hotel stays pointed to a life Elliot was leading outside their marriage, a life funded by deception. One evening, as Elliot slept, Madeline pored over a stack of documents at the kitchen table. Her heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The affair wasn't just about betrayal, it was about control. Elliot had been siphoning money from their accounts to maintain his facade of success, and Chloe was a willing participant in his schemes. By early September, Madeline's suspicions had solidified into certainty. Yet, instead of confronting Elliot outright, she confided in her best friend during a coffee date. Her friend, alarmed by the extent of the betrayal, urged her to take action. "You need to protect yourself," she said firmly. "He's not just lying to you, he's stealing from you." Madeline decided to act. On September 12, she met with a divorce attorney in downtown Charleston. Armed with evidence of Elliot's infidelity and financial misconduct, she began drafting the papers that would sever their marriage. The attorney warned her that Elliot might retaliate, especially given the financial implications. "Be cautious," the lawyer advised. "Men like him don't take losing control lightly." That night, Madeline sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the divorce papers. She could still hear Chloe's laughter echoing in her mind, see Elliot's guilty eyes when she caught him glancing at his phone. Her hand trembled as she signed her name, sealing her decision to take back control of her life. What Madeline didn't know was that her decision had set a dangerous chain of events into motion. Chloe, sensing Elliot's growing unease, had begun pressuring him to act. "You can't let her take everything," she warned during one of their secret meetings. "If she files for divorce, you'll lose everything we've built." Elliot, cornered and desperate, found himself trapped between two worlds. His affair with Chloe had started as an escape, but now it felt like a noose tightening around his neck. The web of lies he'd spun was unraveling, and he knew it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. The tension in the Harper family reached its peak on the night of September 14, when Elliot returned home to find the kitchen bathed in blood and the woman who once trusted him lying lifeless on the floor. The affair that had begun with quiet whispers now echoed with devastating consequences, and the tangled relationships within the Harper family were about to be exposed in the harshest light. The morning after the tragedy, Briarwood Heights was a scene of controlled chaos. Police cruisers lined the quiet cul-de-sac, their flashing lights painting the otherwise tranquil neighborhood in shades of blue and red. Officers moved briskly in and out of the Harper residence, their radios crackling with static. The air was heavy, not just with the gravity of the crime, but with the questions that hung unanswered. At the heart of the commotion was Detective Sophia Rivera. Known for her unrelenting pursuit of justice, Sophia was a seasoned investigator with a sharp intuition that had solved some of Charleston's most perplexing cases. Standing in the Harper kitchen, Sophia took in the scene with a practiced eye. The crime scene spoke volumes. The overturned chair and shattered glass suggested a struggle. The placement of the knife near Madeleine's body indicated it was likely the murder weapon. But what struck Sophia most was the lack of forced entry. Whoever had committed this crime hadn't broken in, they had been let inside. Her gaze drifted to the security camera mounted discreetly above the kitchen door. "Has the footage been reviewed?" she asked a nearby officer. "Not yet, detective. We're pulling it now." Sophia nodded, making a mental note to prioritize the footage. Her instincts told her that the answers lay not just in what the camera had captured, but also in what might have been deliberately concealed. Elliot Harper was seated in the living room, his hands trembling as he clutched a cup of water. His face was pale, his suit rumpled from a sleepless night. To the untrained eye, he looked like a grieving husband consumed by shock. But Sophia had seen enough to know that appearances could be deceiving. "Mr. Harper," she began, her voice steady but firm, "we need to go over the events of last night." Elliot nodded, his voice wavering. I came home late from work. Around 10:30, I think. The lights were on in the kitchen, so I went to check. That's when I found her." His voice broke, and he buried his face in his hands. "She was just lying there. I don't know who could have done this." Sophia studied him carefully. His grief seemed genuine, but his timeline raised a red flag. "You said you came home at 10:30. Can anyone verify your whereabouts earlier in the evening?" Elliot hesitated. "I was at the office, working late. I didn't see anyone." Convenient, Sophia thought, but she didn't press further, yet. Instead, she shifted her focus. "Were there any problems in your marriage, Mr. Harper? Anything that might have caused tension between you and Madeleine?" Elliot shook his head vehemently. "No. We had a good marriage. She was amazing." But the slight pause before he spoke and the faint quiver in his voice didn't escape Sophia's notice. "Amazing," she repeated silently, filing away his response for later. Within hours, Sophia's team began uncovering details that painted a far more complicated picture of the Harpers' seemingly idyllic life. The security footage was the first piece of the puzzle. It showed Elliot entering the house at 10:32 p.m., consistent with his statement. But a closer inspection of earlier footage revealed something far more damning: Chloe Harper arriving at the house at 9:15 p.m. and leaving abruptly just before 10 p.m. The discovery added a new layer of intrigue. Why had Chloe been at the house so late? And why hadn't Elliot mentioned it? Sophia wasted no time summoning Chloe for questioning. At the Charleston police station, Chloe Harper sat across from Sophia, her usually confident demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, and she avoided the detective's piercing gaze. "Miss Harper, can you explain why you were at your sister's house last night?" Sophia asked, her tone calm but probing. Chloe hesitated. I went to drop off some paperwork Madeleine had asked for. She needed them for work." "Work?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "At 9:15 p.m.? Chloe's lips pressed into a thin line. "She said it was urgent." Sophia leaned forward, her voice softening but losing none of its edge. "Chloe, this is a murder investigation. If there's anything you're not telling us, now is the time." The younger woman's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. "I didn't hurt her. I would never, she's my sister." "Then help me understand why the security footage shows you leaving just 30 minutes before Elliot came home," Sophia pressed. Chloe's breathing quickened, and she struggled to form a response. "We argued, okay? Madeleine, she confronted me about something personal. I left because I didn't want to fight." "What did she confront you about?" Sophia's voice sharpened. Chloe hesitated, then whispered, "She knew about me and Elliot. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. With Chloe's admission, Sophia began piecing together the dynamics of the Harper family. Further digging into Elliot's financial records unearthed evidence of hidden accounts, substantial debts, and unexplained withdrawals, all of which aligned with Madeline's discovery just days before her death. A copy of a divorce filing was also uncovered, dated September 12, 2023, only 2 days before the murder. It was clear that Madeline had been preparing to end her marriage and expose Elliot's financial misconduct. The implications were devastating. Elliot stood to lose not just his wife, but his reputation and a significant portion of his assets. The motive for murder was becoming increasingly apparent. The final piece of evidence came in the form of text messages recovered from Elliot's phone. Exchanges with Chloe revealed a year-long affair filled with intimate details and plans to escape together. But one message, sent on the evening of September 14, stood out. "Chloe, she knows. We need to do something before it's too late." Elliot's response was chilling in its simplicity: "I'll handle it." Detective Sofia Rivera now had all the threads she needed to weave the case together. But the deeper she dug, the more disturbing the truth became. What began as a seemingly straightforward domestic tragedy was unraveling into a web of betrayal, deceit, and desperation, one that would soon expose the darkest corners of the Harper family's secrets. Detective Sofia Rivera sat alone in her office at the Charleston Police Department, the glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows across the scattered files. The case had taken shape, but the picture it painted was far darker than she had anticipated. Betrayal, deceit, and desperation were woven into every thread. What began as a tragic murder had unraveled into a tale of manipulation and greed. Now, it was time to confront Elliot Harper with the evidence that could dismantle his carefully constructed facade. Through meticulous investigation, Sophia had uncovered the full extent of Elliot's web of lies. The financial records were damning. Elliot had amassed staggering debts from failed investments and extravagant spending, all hidden from Madeline. He had drained their joint accounts to maintain his public image, shifting money into secret accounts and paying off mounting credit card bills. The prospect of divorce threatened to expose not only his financial misconduct but also the affair that had consumed the last year of his life. Madeline's divorce filing, submitted on September 12, 2023, was the final blow. Sophia pored over the documents, noting the clauses that outlined Elliot's financial liabilities. If finalized, the divorce would strip him of his assets, tarnish his reputation, and leave him with nothing. For a man like Elliot, accustomed to control and admiration, it was an unbearable prospect. Then there were the text messages. The exchanges between Elliot and Chloe were incriminating, but one in particular caught Sophia's attention. Sent just hours before Madeline's death, it was the kind of evidence that turned suspicions into certainty. "Chloe, she's going to ruin everything. You can't let her do this." "Elliot, I'll handle it. Trust me." The chilling implication was clear. Elliot had every reason to silence Madeline, and Chloe's involvement, whether passive or active, was undeniable. Sophia entered the interrogation room where Elliot sat, his hands clasped on the table. His usually confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that he couldn't mask. His eyes darted to the mirrored wall, as if searching for an escape route. "Mr. Harper," Sophia began, setting the file down with deliberate precision. "We've gone through your financial records, your phone logs, and the security footage. We know about the affair with Chloe, the hidden accounts, and the divorce filing. Let me make this simple: you're not here because we suspect you. You're here because we know." Elliot's face flushed. He opened his mouth to protest but stopped himself, the weight of her words sinking in. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice unconvincing. Sophia leaned forward, her tone steely. "Elliot, this is your chance to tell the truth. We have Chloe's statement. She admitted you were desperate to stop Madeline from exposing you. We've read your messages. I'll handle it." Those were your words, weren't they? He shifted uncomfortably, his hands tightening into fists. That doesn't mean I killed her. Then explain the blood spatter on your cufflinks, Sophia said, producing a small evidence bag. Explain why the security footage shows Chloe leaving your house at 10 p.m., just minutes before you arrived. Explain why Madeline's divorce lawyer confirmed she was about to expose your finances in court. The room fell silent. Elliot stared at the table, his jaw clenched, his breathing shallow. I didn't mean for it to happen, Elliot finally whispered, his voice barely audible. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Sophia remained silent, letting him fill the void with his own words. She confronted me, he continued, his eyes welling with tears. That night, she told me she was filing for divorce. She said she knew everything, about Chloe, the money, all of it. She said she was going to ruin me. His hands shook as he spoke, his composure unraveling with each sentence. I begged her to reconsider. I told her I could fix it, that I'd make things right. But she wouldn't listen. She said it was over. What happened next, Elliot? Sophia asked, her voice calm but firm. She said she was going to tell everyone, he choked out. Her lawyer, the court, even the media. She wanted everyone to know what a fraud I was. I couldn't lose everything. I couldn't let her destroy me. His voice broke as he continued. I grabbed the knife. I didn't think, I just reacted. She tried to stop me, but I lost control. One moment, we were arguing, and the next, she was on the floor. Elliot buried his face in his hands, his sobs muffled by his palms. I didn't plan it. I swear I didn't. It just happened. Elliot's confession didn't absolve Chloe. When confronted with the evidence, she admitted to knowing about Elliot's growing desperation and encouraging him to act. While she maintained that she hadn't explicitly suggested violence, her text messages told a different story. I didn't think he'd actually do it, Chloe claimed during her own interrogation. I wanted him to stand up for himself. I never wanted Madeline to get hurt. But Sophia wasn't convinced. Chloe's attempts to distance herself from the crime couldn't erase her complicity. By encouraging Elliot's actions, she had played a pivotal role in the events that unfolded. Elliot was charged with first-degree murder, his confession sealing his fate. Chloe faced charges of obstruction of justice and conspiracy, her cooperation earning her a reduced sentence but leaving her reputation in tatters. The Harper family's dark secrets were laid bare, sending shockwaves through their once idyllic community. Sophia watched as Elliot was led away in handcuffs, his confident facade finally shattered. The case had been solved, but the echoes of betrayal, greed, and desperation lingered. For Madeline, justice had been served, but at a cost that no one could ever truly reconcile. The courtroom buzzed with muted whispers as Elliot Harper was led to his seat, shackled and pale. The polished veneer of the once charismatic realtor was gone, replaced by a man weathered by weeks of interrogation, media scrutiny, and the weight of his own guilt. Across the aisle sat the remnants of Madeline Harper's family, their faces drawn and somber. Chloe Harper was notably absent from the gallery, her once bold presence now eclipsed by public shame and legal repercussions. The trial of Elliot Harper was swift. With his confession, the evidence against him was irrefutable. The prosecution meticulously detailed his financial deception, the affair with Chloe, and his calculated decision to silence Madeline when she threatened to expose it all. But it wasn't just a case of greed, it was a portrait of a man consumed by his own ambition and desperation, willing to destroy the woman who had trusted him most to preserve his illusion of success. On November 15, 2023, the judge delivered the sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The words echoed through the courtroom, met with hushed relief from Madeline's family. For them, it was a semblance of closure, though no amount of justice could ever fill the void left by her absence. Elliot's face remained impassive as the sentence was read, but his hands trembled as the bailiff escorted him out of the courtroom. For the first time in months, the man who had once commanded attention and respect was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a reminder of how easily ambition and deceit could unravel even the most seemingly perfect life. While Elliot faced the consequences of his actions, Chloe Harper's role in the tragedy was far from overlooked. Charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy, Chloe entered a plea deal in exchange for her cooperation during Elliot's trial. She avoided jail time but was sentenced to community service and placed on probation for 3 years. Yet, the legal repercussions paled in comparison to the social fallout. Chloe's betrayal of her sister and her complicity in the events leading to Madeline's death became the subject of relentless gossip in Briarwood Heights. Friends turned their backs, neighbors whispered, and the community ostracized her. Once a magnetic and bold presence, Chloe found herself isolated, burdened by the weight of her choices. In her quiet moments, Chloe grappled with guilt. She replayed every moment of her affair with Elliot, every message she'd sent encouraging him to handle the situation. Though she hadn't wielded the knife, she couldn't escape the truth. Her actions had paved the way for Madeline's murder. In the weeks following the trial, Madeline Harper's family worked to preserve her memory. Her parents, heartbroken but resolute, established a scholarship fund in her name for aspiring teachers in Charleston. Her closest friends organized a memorial at the elementary school where she had taught, filling the halls with photos and stories of the impact she had made on her students and colleagues. For the family, the loss of Madeline was more than just a personal tragedy. It was a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal and unchecked ambition. They channeled their grief into advocacy, speaking out about the importance of transparency and trust in relationships. Through their efforts, Madeline's name became synonymous with resilience and hope, a symbol of the light that could emerge even from the darkest of circumstances. The fallout from the Harper case rippled through Briarwood Heights, leaving a permanent mark on the once idyllic neighborhood. The scandal became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder that appearances could be deceiving. The neighbors who had once envied the Harpers' seemingly perfect life now saw it as a facade, a house of cards built on lies. Trust within the community was strained. Neighbors who had once exchanged pleasantries over manicured hedges now looked at each other with suspicion. The tragedy forced many to confront the fragility of their own relationships, sparking difficult conversations and, in some cases, uncomfortable revelations. Detective Sofia Rivera, though seasoned, found herself deeply affected by the case. Sitting in her office late one evening, she reviewed her notes one final time before filing them away. The case had been solved, justice had been served, but the emotional toll lingered. Sophia had seen many cases of betrayal and greed, but the Harper's story stood out. It wasn't just the crime itself, it was the layers of human fragility, the choices that led to destruction, and the bonds that should have been unbreakable but weren't. In her final report, Sophia wrote, "This case is a testament to the consequences of unchecked ambition, the dangers of deception, and the irreparable harm caused by betrayal. The people closest to us hold the power to lift us higher or tear us apart. It's a sobering reminder that trust is both fragile and essential." The Harper tragedy left a lasting impression on all who heard it, a haunting tale of how love, greed, and betrayal could intertwine with devastating results. It served as a cautionary tale, urging people to examine their own lives, their relationships, and the choices they made. Madeline's story became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, one could stand firm in their values. Her death, though tragic, inspired others to value honesty, cherish their loved ones, and confront their own flaws before it was too late. As the year drew to a close, the Harper home in Briarwood Heights remained vacant, a ghostly reminder of what had transpired. The laughter and warmth that had once filled its halls were replaced by silence, its walls bearing witness to the secrets that had unraveled its inhabitants. Sometimes, those closest to us can become the source of our greatest pain. The tragedy of Madeline Harper was not just a story of betrayal but a poignant reflection on the human condition, on love, trust, and the fragile balance between them. In the end, it was a reminder that even the most perfect facades could hide the deepest cracks. The Harper home sat in silence, its pristine exterior now a hollow shell of the life it once held. Overgrown hedges and a neglected lawn bore testimony to the void left behind. The tragedy that unfolded within its walls had forever stained the neighborhood's collective memory, transforming it from a symbol of suburban success into a monument to broken trust. Despite the devastation, Madeline Harper's legacy endured. The scholarship fund in her name flourished, granting opportunities to young teachers who shared her passion for education. Every recipient carried a piece of Madeline's memory with them, ensuring her compassion and dedication lived on. Her colleagues and students continued to share stories about her warmth and the way she had touched their lives, keeping her spirit alive in the hearts of many. For Madeline's family, the grief never truly faded, but they found solace in honoring her values. Her parents, once reluctant to speak publicly, became advocates for fostering trust and transparency in relationships. They spoke at community events, urging others to recognize the warning signs of deceit and to prioritize communication and honesty. Their message resonated, creating a ripple effect of reflection and healing within the community. Chloe Harper, though spared prison time, became a shadow of her former self. The bold and confident woman who once commanded attention was now reclusive, her name synonymous with betrayal. Friends turned their backs, acquaintances avoided her, and even her attempts to start anew in another city were met with whispers and judgment. Chloe's guilt was a constant companion. She replayed the moments she had encouraged Elliot, the words she had texted without thought of their implications, and the choices that had driven a wedge between her and the sister she once loved. In rare moments of clarity, she wrote letters to Madeline, apologies that would never be sent, confessions that would never find a recipient. Inside the walls of a maximum security prison, Elliot Harper was just another inmate. Stripped of his tailored suits and charismatic charm, he was a man who had lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, and the respect of those who had once admired him. Elliot's days were filled with monotony, but his nights were haunted by memories of Madeline. Her face, etched with heartbreak and betrayal, visited him in dreams that left him gasping for air. The empire he had built on lies had crumbled, leaving him with nothing but regret and the slow realization that his pursuit of control had cost him everything he once held dear. Briarwood Heights never fully recovered from the scandal. The neighbors who had once envied the Harpers' success were now keenly aware of the facades they themselves might be maintaining. The tragedy became a cautionary tale, prompting difficult conversations within households and fostering a collective effort to build stronger, more honest relationships. Detective Sofia Rivera, though moving on to new cases, often reflected on the Harper investigation. It wasn't the bloodiest or most convoluted case she had worked, but it had left a deep impression on her. The betrayal, the tangled motives, the fractured relationships, all served as a reminder of how fragile trust could be and how devastating its loss was. The Harper story was more than a tragedy, it was a reflection of the human condition. It explored the dangers of unchecked ambition, the consequences of betrayal, and the power of truth to both destroy and heal. Madeline's resilience, even in the face of deception, inspired others to confront their own flaws and fight for the relationships they valued most. Now, we turn to you. What are your thoughts on the Harper family's story? Could Elliot have stopped himself before it was too late, or was he a victim of his own choices? Do you think Chloe deserves forgiveness for her role in the tragedy? If you were in Madeline's shoes, would you have handled things differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is vital as we continue to explore stories of betrayal, resilience, and the complexity of human relationships. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories that challenge the way we see the world.